Stay tuned. Smoking brisket today.
Turkey in the brine, piggy in the hole. Got a lot of cooking on this barbecue show. Wood's been chopped and the drinks are cold. Gonna get starting all the smoking coals. Got a lot of meats of all different kinds. If I'm the one cooking, my wife doesn't mind. Kids stay gone all the time. They come home when it's eating time. Parents coming over and my brothers too. Gonna sample all this barbecue. Lot of tongue slapping going on. It's time for me to eat and end this song.
Y'all gonna have to excuse me. I got some eating to do.
Here I am getting the smoker ready to start smoking. We're going to be smoking the brisket at 225 degrees. And we're going to set the timer way out so we don't have to worry about it turning off in the middle of our smoke. This is about 5:30 in the morning, so it's pretty dark and cold, about 19 degrees outside. Next, I'm getting the brisket ready. I'm using Stubbs rub for beef. I've actually already seasoned this and then let it set in the refrigerator overnight. And I'm just adding a little extra here just to make sure I have plenty of seasoning on the beef before I put it on the smoker. I have the temperature probe in the brisket, getting it all ready to be put on the smoker when the time comes. You can tell that the internal temperature is currently 39 degrees. We'll let it set out and warm up a little bit before I put it on the smoker. Just seems to do better. Now it's time to put the brisket on the smoker. You can see that I've got the thermometer probe plugged in and I'm keeping that external. This particular thermometer, by the way, has an alarm on it, so I can set the temperature I want the meat to alarm at, and it will actually go off an alarm and let me know. I'm also filling up the wood chip bin so I can get plenty of smoke. Okay, here I'm making the final adjustments to the smoker. Make sure the vent is open so it will regulate the temperature. Making sure that I can see the thermometer actually from the window inside. That's the reason why it's turned around that way. I'm trying to keep the moisture content up in the brisket, so I'm having apple juice that I'm actually basting the meat with, the brisket with. And I'm actually doing this every hour after this point to make sure that the moisture content stays up. Don't want that brisket to dry out. In addition to having the apple juice that I'm using for basting, I have apple juice actually in my moisture basin or drip band, whatever you want to call it, just to make sure that as the smoker heats that up, that it actually flavors the meat. And I'm actually going to be using that apple juice in that drip basin to make our sauce later on. Here I've actually hit my stall temperature at 150 degrees. It hasn't moved there for the last 30 minutes or so. It was moving up progressively before. So I had a choice to make. I can either leave it in there as it is and let it progressively go up, or I could wrap it in foil, and I opted to wrap it in foil to keep the moisture content high in the meat. It's interesting that once I put the meat in the foil, the temperature within the meat actually rose pretty quickly hereafter. Brisket has reached its targeted temperature. It's time to get it out, get it wrapped up and put in the cooler. Okay, I've got the brisket wrapped up in a towel, also in foil, in the cooler. I'm putting these bottles of hot water in with the cooler to maintain the warm temperature. This actually cooked a little quicker than I anticipated, so I'm having to keep it warmer longer. So I'm using this hot water to hopefully keep the cooler warmer. Next, we're going to start with our Smokey Apple Reduction Sauce that we're going to use on the brisket slices once we get to that point. Here we've got about a tablespoon of olive oil and a half a cup of onions that we're going to put in there. We want to get the onions where they're caramelized. So as you see, I'm stirring this. It's kind of hard to see in this light, but you start seeing a little brown in there on the onions. They start turning a little bit brown. That's exactly what you want. You want to cook those onions down to where they're just starting to turn brown like that. So here's my drip basin. You'll notice that I do have some drippings here that's on the drip basin that are really black looking. That is like gold. It has a real smoky flavor, and we want to preserve that and so we can use that in our reduction. That's for our sauce coming up. We're actually going to use this leftover apple juice that we had in here, and we're going to clean this pan of all these drippings that we can so we can put them in our sauce to flavor our sauce. And here we have a half a cup of brown sugar, which I've already put in before I started turning the camera on. I put about a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, something like that, and I sprinkled in some of my Stubbs rub in there to help season that as well, to help bring more flavor that I put on the brisket back into my sauce. And as you can tell, it's very, very thin right now. I'm hoping it will thicken up as we go along. So the sauce has been cooking at kind of a medium high, just kind of a steady rolling boil now for the last 15 minutes or so, and it's reduced by half. I'm adding some black pepper and some salt. I'm doing this to taste. I've already added some salt prior to showing this on the video, but you want to salt this to your taste. This is going to be very sweet because of the reduction. The apple juice is going to be very, very sweet. The brown sugar is going to be very, very sweet. And between those two, you need something to kind of offset it a little bit. So here the sauce has been going for a good bit of time. I'm turning the heat off, covering it, going to set it off on the cool side of the stove and see if it will thicken up. I decided to add some jelly to the sauce because it's still a little thin from what I wanted. And I also added some red pepper flakes, and you can kind of make those out into the sauce to give it a little more bite. I kind of like that on my beef. After letting it set for a little bit, you can tell that it's really thickened up quite a bit, and that's about the texture that I was shooting for right there. You want to keep it kind of loose, but yet a little bit thick as well. All right, it's time to get this brisket out of the cooler and start slicing it up. Can't wait. I should have left this brisket stand for about 2 hours in the cooler. It was actually in the cooler for more like 4 hours. If I had to do it all over again, I would sliced it up a little bit earlier, just because it would have a lot more moisture in the meat at this point. The meat had cooled off. It was still warm to the touch, but it was not as warm as I'd like for it to be. I sliced off a few slices here real thin just to see how well it will hold together. The brisket flavor was awesome. It was very tender. Uh, it, it was really firm though, and I was kind of surprised. It was not tough, it was firm, but it would pull apart very easily, just as you saw earlier. And really, I can't wait to eat my sandwiches at this point. Doesn't that look delicious? And look at that smoke ring around the outside of that meat. Isn't that awesome? And you can actually tell the moisture there on the left that was still in the meat. Very delicious.
Well, my brisket turned out great. Family loved eating it. I loved eating it. My wife didn't care for the amount of heat I had in my sauce. Next time I do that, I'll probably hold back on the amount of crushed red pepper that I put in there, the red pepper flakes. Um, just when you're cooking it, it just seems like it needs something a little extra, and you keep adding stuff rather than letting it simmer. And that's probably where I got to. Um, this was the first brisket that I did. I learned a whole lot in the process, and it still turned out great. I think there's a couple tweaks I can make that would make it even better. I'm thinking that an injection marinade might be ideal. Um, but yeah, I mean, I still love the meat. You can't beat it. I mean, the flavor of it's just awesome. The sauce that I made was my own sauce. I made it kind of as I went along. We had about 2 cups of apple juice in the drip basin, along with the drippings from the meat that I was able to scrape out of the pan. And I started off by browning the onions, as you saw, in the olive oil. And I added brown sugar, the Worcestershire sauce, Stubbs dry rub, and I let that all come to a boil and reduce by half the volume. At that point, I began to season the sauce to my taste by adding the salt, the pepper, and the red pepper flakes. When the consistency did not come up as much as I would like, I added a jelly. Actually, it was a pepper jelly that I added to the sauce. It could be anything. You could use grape jelly. You could use anything. You want something that's firm though, something that's truly gelled, so that way it'll bring the thickness up. But I'm gonna tell you, it was spectacular. It really was. I'm looking forward to doing it again. I'm gonna post the ingredients up on the page probably while I'm talking here, and you guys can take a look at it and see if you want to write it down or whatever. Like I said, just tweak on it and make it your own. Anyway, this is Robin signing off.
Turkey in the brine, piggy in the hole. Got a lot of cooking on this barbecue show. Wood's been chopped and the drinks are cold. Gonna get starting on the smoking coals. Got a lot of meats of all different kinds. If I'm the one cooking, my wife doesn't mind. Kids stay gone all the time. They come home when it's eating time. Parents coming over and my brothers too. Gonna sample all this barbecue. Lot of tongue slapping going on. It's time for me to eat and end this song.
Y'all gonna have to excuse me. I got some eating to do.